Hi, this is the 8th tutorial and today I'm going to use the Facebook SDK to create our own grant type. In this, we will be checking the access token coming from the Facebook server, validating it using the SDK, and if we find that the access token is correct, then we will generate an access token from our server and give it back to the user. So if we need to simplify things and list them down point by point, then this is what the series, or rather this is what the flow will be. First, the user will log in to our application using the Facebook login type, which I have already shown you in my tutorial where you can use the Facebook SDK, JavaScript SDK to log in, which is this. So what it does basically is it gives us a pop-up. If we log in, then we get the Facebook user object and the access token. Now, our JavaScript application will send this access token from Facebook server to our server to validate. So, validate access token coming from FB server. If we find that the access token is correct using the Facebook SDK, then we will check whether the user exists or he is a new user, create his new account, and then give him an access token. So check if the user exists. No. Create new account. Yes. Update his profile, where practically we will be storing his entire user object as to speak, and then last step will be give him an access token. So now the question is, why do we want to make so many authentications? The basic thing is, in this scenario, the user is never going to share his username or password over the wire, right? He is going to log in to Facebook, and then Facebook is giving him an access token. And then we are only validating the access token and giving him access to our resources based on the validation we have done on our server. Which means practically we have nullified any reason for the user to send his username password to our server through the wire. So let's get started. The first thing which we need to do is get the Facebook SDK. I have already done that in my composer.json file, which is Facebook PHP SDK version 4. You can just add this line and do a composer update and you will get the required composer library. Alright, once we are done, what we will do is create a new class inside HTTP OAuth Facebook grant type. Now obviously this will be similar to what we have done to create our own user type grant using the username and password. We need to implement the grant type interface. So let's quickly do the basic steps. Namespace. This will be app/http and I'm inside the OAuth folder. Alright. And then my class Facebook grant type. And this will implement the grant type interface. I'll just go press Alt Enter and add method stubs, which will practically give me all the methods which I need to override or rather implement, so that we can implement the grant type interface. So this is simple. The first thing is get query identifier. We will return this as Facebook. Client ID, I can return null. Right now I'm not going to return anything else. The user object or the user ID is something which comes to the result object. The user ID is part of the user object, and so what I will do is say return this user ID, which means I need to create one property, protected $user. The scope can again be simply null, and the create access token methods is simple. This is return $access token. We have a method create access token where I will send the client ID, the user ID, and the scope. Okay, so once this is done, we need to return true to get an access token. Once we have the grant type ready, we need to add that to the singleton. So what we will do is go into our routes file where we have the OAuth 2 singleton. We will add server, a new grant type, new app HTTP OAuth. Oops, I did something wrong. So app HTTP OAuth Facebook grant type. We'll pass the storage, and this is ready. Now, just to check that the things are working correctly, what I will do is spin up this instance on localhost. This is my front end, and this is my learning L5 instance. So yes, I will run it on localhost 8090. Localhost 8090. Alright, this is working. As you can see that we have created a new grant type called Facebook, which means we can get an access token. And because I have returned true, this validate request will always return an access token. This is the URL 8090 OAuth token, and as you can see, this is practically basic stub. So alright, my PDO. Alright, I think the problem is the user ID, because in my grant type I'm returning this user ID, which is currently null, and that's the reason it's giving an error. So what I will do is, for now, just comment it and instead say return 1. Send, and we're generating the access token. Alright, now we know that the URL is going to give us a valid access token. The next step is basically get the access token from Facebook, put it in this code, and check whether we are generating an access token after the validation through the Facebook SDK. Alright, so let's start with the proper validate request method. First thing that we need to do is get the code, that is the access token. So I will do this request /code, because in my Postman this is the key and value will be the access token. With the code ready, we will create a Facebook session, set default application, and in this I will use my environment variables. So env is fb app underscore id and env fb app underscore secret. Facebook session is created. So now $session equals new Facebook session, and I will pass the code. Let's write a try catch block. The first catch will be Facebook request exception. So Facebook $ex, and the second one will be a normal exception, which is import the class $ex again. Okay, now time for the main block. First we will do a session slash validate method. If there is anything wrong with the session, which means if the code is wrong or anything, it will fail, which will result in an exception. Alright, if the exception passes, then response equals new Facebook request, and in that we will pass the session. We'll say we need a get request, and from the Graph API we use the /me, and last execute. This is basically doing a Facebook request with our current session. It's a get method, and we are using the Graph API's /me to get the user object. This is something which I have already done to implement the Facebook user login, so you can also get the same code in my welcome controller, which is this. Very well, the response is ready. So now $object equals $response, sorry, get graph object. So after the try method, I have just copy pasted this log informations in the catch block, and you need to import the class of log just to make sure that your log/info is working. Anyways, so we are here till object, where we have received the complete user object. Now what we can do is, just to check that everything is working properly, we will return the user object as in die dump the Laravel's dd $object. Now to get this result, what I need to do is get a valid access token from Facebook, which means I need to do an Facebook login right now. So I come to L5 frontend. Again, I spin up a new instance, localhost port 8000, host port 8000. This is my FB login. I need to keep my console on because I'll be printing out the access token. So this is my access token. I need to pass it as code, which is this. So there's something wrong. Oh no, I was wrong. So preview gives us the entire user object, which is something similar to what we also get in this place, which is the entire user object from Facebook. Email, first name, gender, ID, same details are printed here. Which means, so if we are coming till $object, then it means that the user has sent a valid access token, and so we can give him an access token from our end as well. But before we do that, we will create his user object because we want him to have an account on our website, and we will have to first check that. So quickly I will write some boilerplate code which I have already added, and once the try catch block is over, we will just put it if $object. Then I create a new array which is Facebook user object, and I practically get the entire fields coming from Facebook in that array. So if you see, this is the fields which I'm getting, and I have added each and every one of them, right? I use the object get property and then the key of the property to get that in the array. And then I'm also setting up some of the fields in the user property of this class, which is defined here, protected $user, and then I do a return true. Alright, things are working, and basically this means that we have the user object, we have this user, and now a small check where we will see whether the user exists in our database or not. If it does, then what we will do is update his user profile, and if it doesn't, then we will create a new user using the credentials, or rather using the details of that user. I already have the functions ready, so I'll just copy paste and just go through them so that we are on the same page. This check user if exist, we will check using a query whether the user with that particular user ID exists in our database or not. If we find that it exists, then we will do an update profile, and if it doesn't, then we do a create user profile. So just create the stubs. We have create check if user exists, update profile, create user profile. Alright, time to write the check if user exists. So we do user, import class app user, user where email is user email, because obviously the user IDs are the email address. If we find that user, then this user ID equals user ID. Alright, that's interesting. And return true or else return false. Now the update profile. I say db table user profile, where user ID is this user ID, update data with serialize Facebook user object. And now the last part, which is create user profile. So we do, and also we will have to insert the data into the user profile table and paste. So we do db table insert user ID as user ID, UID is the Facebook UID, type we are maintaining as Facebook, and then again serialize the entire Facebook data similar to what we have done in update profile. I still have the access token, so I will generate a new access token. I mean, the Facebook access token is still in the code, so I don't need to make any changes. And alright, it generated the access token, which means the code ran successfully. I had 11 users and the user profile table was empty. Refresh. So I have one new user and the user profile has one new entry. Let's check that. We do browse. Last record in the table is Amitav Roy with my Gmail user ID. Okay, created at 10:39. This is fine. And the user profile table, user ID 13, which is correct, and this is the Facebook user ID, and my entire data is serialized in the data column, which I can use at any point of time. Okay, one mistake which I have done is the created and updated date are not coming properly, which we can rectify later on. Well, that's about it. That's how we implement the Facebook grant type using the Facebook SDK. If you like this video, do click on the thumbs up icon, and also you can subscribe to my YouTube channel